Okay, guys, so this is revision part 2, and I'm going to try to keep my camera going forward, so hopefully this makes some sense. So you have your narrative up on your screen because yesterday you worked through revising some of your repeated sentence starting words a bit. I had issues with that and some other issues, and so I have drafted pretty much all my story. I'm not quite done with the resolution. I have the story done, and I'm gonna share it with you now. It's kind of freaked me out, and then Nora walked in, and so I was like totally scared. So let me share with you what I have here. So get it up, and I'm gonna show you like this. Okay, so you can see here that I have, so I'm just gonna read it, and I want you to follow along with me. So trying some of the things, and this is still a draft, so I'm still working on it. So I write, I bet you're all too scared to walk through the old haunted milking barn in Meraki's field. My brother and I looked at each other, panic marking our foreheads, our eyebrows knitted together. It was the one thing our parents said we should never do, go into the old milking barn in Mr. Meraki's field. Years and years ago, Mr. Meraki had farmed asparagus in the field across the street from our house, until all the Japanese Americans were interred at Camp Harmony in Puyallup. Unlike other Japanese American families, the Meraki family never returned to Moses Lake at the end of World War II. The family farm was overgrown with tumbleweeds and wild grass, but you could rifle around and find some asparagus in a few sweet spots. The milking barn barely counted as a building, old and dilapidated as it was. The rough old stones used to build the structure were slowly crumbling to dust, the roof long since rotted away. All of the windows had been broken out by reckless teenagers, and graffiti marked the exterior as a place one should never enter. My brother and I weren't even tempted to enter this creepy old building. But Ronnie Tokunaga, the oldest in our gang, suggested it. And pretty much whatever Ronnie suggested, we would most definitely do it. My brother and I were the youngest in the group. I was 5, my brother was 8, and it was early fall. The days were long and filled with adventure. That day we were sitting on the rock wall at the Stanford's house. The big kids were trying to one-up each other. It was always the same, who was braver or tougher. That's when Ronnie got his big idea. I looked from my brother's face to Ronnie's. Ronnie didn't flinch, he was serious. He was daring us to prove our worth. Teenagers Scott Stanford and Mike Sievers agreed with him. Then Mike and Ryan Fisk. What were we going to do? Were we really going to tell the gang that we were scared? Or that our parents wouldn't let us enter the barn, and we were too afraid to disobey their only request? Yeah, we'll go too, my brother said. My blood ran cold. I knew he was just as scared as I was. It was very clear that he did not want to do this. I knew I didn't want to do this, but it was important that we act cool around this new group of friends. We'd only lived in our house for a few months, and it was great living in a neighborhood with so many kids our age. We would never live it down if we didn't follow through with the plan. Well, there's no better time like the present, Ronnie declared. He looked each of us in the face to see our reaction. I kept my eyes downcast so he wouldn't see how terrified I was. He hopped down off the rock wall and started to walk toward the field. On the short walk to the field, my hands grew sweaty and my knees started to tremble. My brother knew I was scared. He tried to catch my eye, but I focused on the ground. He grabbed my hand, something he rarely did now that he was in the 3rd grade, as we crossed the street to enter the field. We had to walk up a slight incline, jump the irrigation ditch, and make our way to the barn. We had to pass the 2 deep garbage pits Meraki used when he lived nearby. You could still see the springs from an old mattress, food cans, beer bottles, and old personal items in the pit. My friend Heather and I used to jump up and down on the old mattress springs like a trampoline. As we approached the barn, I noticed all the graffiti, filled with warnings about entering the building. Beware, danger, haunted. It was the haunted that frightened me most. You would have thought it would be light inside without the roof and all, but the windows made the old barn look like it held the darkness of night. Ronnie kicked the barn door, an old metal door that looked scratched and battered. I wondered, how did the scratches get on the door? Who had fingernails that strong, or long? From the height of the markings, I knew it wasn't an animal. Shivers led down my spine. Ronnie went first, and the other teenage boys. My brother, still holding my hand, went before me. Stay close. I'll protect you." I took a deep, shaky breath. I didn't think my feet would move, but Ronnie sneered, "What, you two chicken?" I entered the barn. It looked spooky, all right. The floor was busted up, glass and debris were everywhere, bottles were strewn on the ground. I could barely pull my eyes from the cracked cement floor. Suddenly there was a crash. Everyone froze, silent. "What was that?" one of the teens asked. "I don't know," another whispered. Shadows crept along one of the walls. I knew we were in a bad place, and now we would never be able to leave, never ever be able to leave. I just knew ghosts were going to get us, but I was so terrified I couldn't scream or make a peep. An axe murderer lived in the barn and would get his revenge. Why on earth was I too afraid just to say no? I don't want to go into the barn. I'm going to change that to didn't. Another motion flickered in the light. We turned to run out, but got confused. How do we get out of here? We started scrambling, falling, crying, all of us. I could see a ray of light, our escape. "Follow me," I yelled. Everyone followed my voice. We made our way out of the barn and into the sunlight of the afternoon. I had 2 skinned knees and a bloody elbow. So did most everyone else. Ronnie had a cut above his right eyebrow. "What was in there?" Ronnie cried. His voice was shaky and filled with tears. "I don't know," my brother said. "Whatever it was, it didn't want us in there." "How did you know how to get out, Stacy?" Ronnie asked. "I don't know. I just followed my gut," I replied. "Well, you're the youngest one here, and you were the only one who saved us. I guess you're the bravest one in the gang," Ronnie declared. So that's where I'm at right now. So I want to end it and make sure it's clear of my, my learning and kind of wrap it up. But I'm close to the end. So what I want you to do now with your narrative is I want you to take some time to look at your climax. So the climax of my story is when I entered the barn, because this is where I forever changed. So going into the barn. So what I want you to do with your climax is I want you to highlight it like I just did mine, and I want you to make it bold so that you and I both know that part's your climax of the story. The problem's at its worst. And then everything that's before the climax, I want you to slow it down. So I talk about we approached the barn, and I try to slow it down. I talk about the graffiti and the warnings and what frightened me the most. And then Ronnie kicked the barn door. What I want to do is convey that there were scratch marks on the inside of the door as well. There were marks on the outside, but the inside there were scratch marks and then indentations in this metal door. And it was really creepy, like someone had been locked in. So I'm going to add that here to this part right here about the shivers. And then Ronnie goes in first. And so I try to slow down my action, because one thing you have to do is build some suspense right before the climax. So I tried to do that here in these paragraphs. And I do that by talking about what's going on in my thoughts, noticing like parts of the barn, things like that. There were also these creepy cobwebs in the corners of the doorway. Like those old cobwebs that when you pull them, they make a sound. So I'm going to get that in there too. So I want you to do that. And then after you slow down your the activity right before your climax, I want you to start at the beginning. And this will take you a little while. But everything that's going through your mind, your thoughts and your feelings, I want you to highlight it. So I have this line here. My brother and I looked at each other, panic marking our foreheads, our eyebrows knitted together. And then I go to this next line. It was the one thing our parents said we should never do. So I'm going to get to a really good one. My brother and I weren't even tempted to enter this creepy old building. So you highlight it, and then you hit the slanted eye up here. That's italicized. And every thought and feeling, I want you to italicize it. So as you go through it too, and then you're reading it, and that's when you notice things that you don't like or that are awkward, then you fix that. So this is revision day 2, and I hope you have a really good time.